in the book Climate Wars in 2009. There are 4 main things he learned that I think you ought to know. The first is that the scientists who study the climate are in a state of near panic at the moment. Things seem to be moving much faster than their models predicted. Once, they thought that the Arctic North Pole sea ice might melt fully in the summer of 2070, or if you were really pessimistic, 2050. Now, they think it will all be gone in the summer in 2015. 3 years. That's it. This year, Tim Flannery reported to Dave Deheen, one of the organisers of this event, and myself were at Lane Cove for the launch of his new book. And in response to a question, I asked him about some of these tipping points in some of my talk, because I really just wanted a bit of a reality check. Sometimes the news really doesn't sink through to us. But he said, Gus, this year, 80% of the North Pole has melted, of the sea ice up there, 80%. It's shattered the 2007 record, which itself shattered the 2005 record that was the all-time record of melting since people have been up there looking at it. So, that's not good for the polar bear, but it's also not good for us. The second thing he found is that global warming is going to cause conflict and wars, because depending on where your country is and how well it's prepared, how much money it has, some countries will suffer much more at different times than others. In fact, the conflict in Darfur region of Sudan that George Clooney was heavily involved with on the media and his father was really the first official climate war. The Arabs to the north in Sudan found that their lands were drying out, so they moved south, expelling ethnic cleansing and plundering the villages of the mainly Christian African tribes people. And it turns out, as usual, this conflict was much less about religion that you see on the media. It's not about that. It was actually about food, where the food is, who's got the food, and more about the expansion of the Hadley Sills. If you look at an atlas of the world or a globe, you'll see in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere 2 brown bands of land, where it's brown. Where it's brown, they're deserts. That's a Hadley Sill. 1735. So a lot of this science is not new. That's why, I don't engage very much, except maybe only with my father-in-law out of respect. I don't engage in debates anymore on science, on the really fundamental science. There's a lot of unsureness around the details and when things will happen, of course, but the basics. 1735, Hadley, the British scientist Hadley, found that these cells, they take the moist air from the equator, it falls in the tropics, and then it comes down in the subtropics, basically dry, and that's why you have these 2 bands of desert. Well, they're expanding. We've got expanding deserts in Spain. We've got uncontrollable forest fires in Greece. We've got farms failing in Mexico. And what do you see in all these situations is a flood of migrants. They're crossing the Mediterranean, tens of thousands of them going into Europe. They risk their lives. They go across the US border from Mexico because they've just got no food. And of course they come from Asia via Indonesia into Australia. And we all know what a difficult political problem that is for us to solve. We can't agree, we can't work out what to do about it. Our humanity goes out the window. That's the third thing.
People can agree, the general population, but politicians can't. No, I wouldn't go that far.
Try listening to Talkback Radio.
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky does it. He says, I just want to keep my finger on the pulse of what people are thinking. And I think, God, you're very brave. So they're on the move all around the globe. The third thing is that we're probably hitting tipping points. Positive feedbacks, if you like, where we lose control of the climate system. If we get to those tipping points, some people in the scientific community think we've already passed them. I don't even want to say it, but I have to say that. Most scientists think we've still got time, but only a few years. I mean, it's that extraordinary. We're living through history. I don't know if you can really feel that, but we're really living through this history. That's why I hope this talk and even this festival is meant to be a ripple in a pond. We're all like just little pebbles. We're just little pebbles. We're significant as individuals, but in the big scheme of things, our personal behaviour doesn't do much, our example even. But in the spirit of Martin Luther King, Gandhi, even Jesus Christ, if you like, our words, they are powerful. The pen is mightier than the sword, if you like. Our families don't know these issues, don't understand how serious they are. Our families love us. They love our children. My 9-month-old child. And that's what got James Hansen, probably NASA's top scientist at the Goddard Institute, and probably the most famous climate scientist in the world. He wrote his new book, Storms of My Grandchildren. He wrote it for his grandchildren because he wants their life to be livable. Storms of My Grandchildren, the truth about the coming climate catastrophe and our last chance to save humanity. And he's no negative guy. He's a beautiful man. If you Google him and look at him on YouTube to hear him speak, he's an absolutely gem of a person. But I think we need to understand where we're going. I think I'm going to finish up now, but I'm going to finish this presentation on climate change. I've greatly cut down for time, but I think that people everywhere, even progressive, open-minded people, even many great people I meet at the festival, really are relatively complacent about global warming. I don't know if you find that in your own lives and your conversations. People think my actions, my example, technology, or someone somewhere will fix it in time. I think that's because people don't understand about the tipping points, about the feedbacks, how we can lose control of the climate system, like the melting of the ice in the North Pole, causing an absorption of more heat by the oceans. So I think we need to get motivated, and to get motivated we need to be able to imagine what the world might look like if we don't get our act together in the next few years and change the way we use energy, create electricity, and move ourselves around, even the food we eat. The best way to imagine a climate change world is with a scenario. The scenario I'm going to play you, it's just a minute long, developed by Gwyn Dyer, and all the events depicted are based on one or more studies or projections done by scientists and the intelligence community somewhere around the globe. And the average global temperature in this scenario is 2.8 degrees higher than it was in 1990. The year is 2046.
It's 12 years since the European Union collapsed. Germany, France, and Poland have regained some stability now that their new border defenses have stopped mass flight northwards from the Mediterranean countries. The Italians have basically lost control of the country south of Rome to refugees from the other side of the Mediterranean. But northern Italy will have nuclear weapons by next year. The Spanish have largely recovered from last year's famine, and they are getting nuclear weapons too. It's suspected that both countries plan to blackmail Northern Europe into giving them more food. After the collapse of the EU, the British pulled up the drawbridges. It's Fortress Britain now. In China, almost half the population has survived the floods and famine, but there's a permanent drought in northern China. The Russians are afraid that the Chinese plan to grab the grain lands of Siberia. This seems very likely. Southern India is re-emerging as a major regional power, but what used to be northern India, Pakistan, and the parts of Bangladesh still above sea level are all no-go areas because of famine, refugees, and bandits. Further west, the radiation levels are still very high in the territory between Delhi and Lahore. The expulsion of Mexico from the North American Free Trade Area has had grave consequences for Mexicans. The wall along the U.S.-Mexican border is still holding, and deaths along it are down by half in the past 3 months. The latest numbers from the Arctic suggest that methane emissions from the permafrost are now overwhelming all progress in cutting greenhouse gas emissions from human sources. Brazil, Bangladesh, and several other governments are known to be considering emergency interventions in the atmosphere to prevent runaway warming. The newly elected Green administration in the United States is threatening to use nuclear weapons to stop them from carrying out such a dangerous experiment.
That's Gwendaya. Perhaps you don't like that scenario I just played. It sounds too much like Hollywood. Well, yes, that's what happens when you try to imagine a dramatically changed world. And that is 2046. That's only 34 years in the future. We'll all still be around at that time. Our children will just be young. But that is what we're doing right now. We're producing that world just by living the lives the way we do. I drove my car down here. And we all turn on our light switches. And the chances are it's produced by coal, the largest source of greenhouse gases in the world. 40% of all greenhouse gases are from burning coal for electricity. Australia is the largest exporter of coal in the world. And our state, New South Wales, is the largest state. Right now, we are considering developing the largest coal mine on the planet at the Galilee Basin in Queensland. And it's probably called Galilee because it will lead to a biblical apocalypse. We better stop that from going ahead. I'm involved with Greenpeace, who are mounting a great big challenge. And I think we all should be a part of that, the World Wildlife Fund and all the other tremendous work that is being done to stop that. Stop Gina Reinhardt and others doing that. NASA, probably the world's top climate scientist, NASA's scientist James Hansen, when asked to comment on New South Wales Hunter Valley coal trains delivering to the largest coal port in the world in Newcastle, called those trains death trains because they're killing the future of his grandchildren. When I spoke to a very green-minded friend, a couple of friends actually recently, they're here at this festival, about the immorality of burning coal, he said, we can't stop burning or exporting coal. They will just get it from somewhere else, somewhere worse in the world. And it'll damage our economy and put too many people out of work. That seemed to me to epitomise the old thinking. You know, that we can't change, it's too hard, fear.
Jobs.
All these things are myths that I spoke about at the beginning of my talk, that John Kennedy said is the greatest threat to truth, is myths. Because when Britain faced their energy crisis, they started the Industrial Revolution because they ran out of the old fuel, which was wood. They cut down all their forests. They had a crisis in their economy. Their economy was very stressed. They switched to coal. Sure, all their horse and buggy industries, their buggy whips, their blacksmiths, so much of their economy went out of business, crashed, caused lots of difficulties. But because of that switch, they were ahead of everyone else. Their economy boomed. In the same way, we will boom. Plenty of work's been done. The famous economist Lord Nicholas Stern wrote the very famous report to the British government showing how the economy will boom. Ross Garnaut did the same thing here, and Professor Jeffrey Sachs has done the same thing. I heard him myself at Sydney University. Beautiful man. Also speaks up for the poor. He's done the same modelling. He's considered by Time magazine the most important economist in the world today. He's done the same modelling. We can do really well. We've got to change our thinking. We've got to change our energy. And the most important thing, we're the ripples in the pond. We've got to change our family and friends and bring them on board, be motivated, get up on this, be part of a better world. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.